Can I help you?
Yeah, I've got a package for a Fabio Wibmer.
Let me go get him. Oh, hey, is that for me?
You're Fabio Wibmer.
Definitely. There's no disguising that.
Yeah, I guess you can't get this bike in North America, so I just wanted to be sure it's going to the right guy.
You're in the right spot. Let me go ahead and take that off your hands.
Wait a minute.
All right, thanks, man. Thanks, Fabio. Well, if you haven't figured it out by now, inside this box is something special. It's the Canyon stitched CFR Trials bike. This is the bike that Fabio designed with Canyon, and you've seen both Fabio and Tomomi Nishikubo absolutely shred on this bike. Now, one of the things that I'm really interested to see as we unbox this bike is how the spec comes together. So this bike right here cost $2,799 US, which is a couple $100 less than what the Inspired 4Play Team costs. Now, the Inspired 4Play Team is arguably the best 24-inch street trials bike out there with the best spec out of the box. But this bike is a couple $100 cheaper, so I'll be super curious to see what the spec is like, how this actually stacks up to what's currently the gold standard in the sport. So let's unbox this thing and see what it's all about. Hey, one quick thing before we unbox this bike. I just have to say a huge thank you to the crew at Canyon for making this happen. Like I mentioned, you can't get this bike in the States right now, and they were able to get one sent to me. So a huge thank you to Scott and the entire crew at Canyon for making this happen. I super appreciate it. And also for all of you watching, thank you for supporting our channel to get us to the point where bike companies are actually willing to go the extra mile to send us bikes to test in front of you. Thank you for watching, thank you for supporting, and let's open this thing up. Here goes. This is actually the most dialed bike build ever because it has a box that says, "Let's get started," which I'm assuming is the first thing I should open up before I open up the rest of the box. Quick start guide. How dialed is this? It comes with its own tools, like a torque wrench, some carbon assembly paste. Look at this. This is wild. I've never seen a bike come with all the tools to put it together. Mountain bike manual. This is insane. They really throw the book at you. See, this is the big differentiating factor when you have a mega bike company actually build a trials bike. Not only are they able to maybe keep the cost down because they're buying in bulk across hundreds of other different bikes, but they can do so many different special things just to give those added little touches like what came in this little assembly box. I mean, who sends a torque wrench and all these Allen keys and assembly paste? I mean, they're adding so many extra things that you just would never get with any other bike build. This is really just a different level of bike assembly and packaging and everything. I mean, this is incredible. I'm blown away that all this extra stuff came with it. I would have been perfectly happy if there was just a carbon bike and some wheels in that box. But seriously, this stuff takes effort and this is super impressive. Bravo, Canyon. This is awesome. Now feels like a good time to shout out the last major bike brand to come out with a complete trials bike. This is my 1998 GT Team Trials. Big shout out to Hans Ray. The thing that's so important about major bike brands coming out with complete trials bikes is their accessibility. At the time, you could go to any bike shop that sold GT and order this bike, which meant that thousands of new riders got into trials because they instantly had access to a complete trials bike. They didn't have to build something up from scratch or try to find a trial shop anywhere. And that was a huge deal at the time. Just like now, Canyon being so accessible, this big brand coming out and making this bike available to riders around the world, it's a huge deal for our sport and getting more people on trials bikes. Big shout out to both these brands for jumping in and making a complete trials bike. Oh yeah, and this is my senior photo from high school. There we go. So one of the things that I was most interested in when it came to unboxing this bike was the actual spec that it came with. And right out of the box, the first component we pull out is a pair of DT Swiss wheels with Continental tires. These look like 203mm rotors on here too, which is bigger than any other bike brand specs. Normally you'll get a 180mm, but to do a 203 right out of the box, that's a big deal. So it's an SQ Lab seat that comes with it, but it's actually Fabio's signature seat here. You can see his little signature on the bottom. It's pretty cool how he incorporated all of his partners in the bike itself too. Okay, I think this is coming out in one shot. Here we go. Moment of truth. Time for the fun part. Wow. I think you can actually see it here, but they routed the front brake cable through the steer tube, which is a huge help for a lot of riders who are getting complete bikes and may not be that confident unhooking hydraulic lines and putting them back together. So this is a huge deal when they do this, when they route that through there and have the brake lines already pre-assembled like that. This is actually going to be my first experience riding anything made by SQ Lab, but I've obviously seen it on a lot of Fabio's bikes over the years. Now the real moment of truth. If you've seen any other bike unboxing video or bike build video that I do, you know I'm super picky when it comes to handlebars. I like to have a much higher rise bar. So I'm curious to see how we landed on this one. Does that look like an 80 mil rise to you? I think it is. It's going to be close. These grips are something interesting too. So it appears that all of this stuff is Fabio's signature stuff because it says trial right on the handlebars here and his signature's on the grips. This really is a proper signature bike. It's cool to see one of these come together, doubly so for a trials rider. Now there's obviously a lot of extra brake cable because if you ride like Fabio, you're doing all kinds of bar spins and tail whips. I'm gonna have to work on this at some point and get it tucked out of the way because I don't think I'm gonna do any of that. But I'm kind of inspired to now. Just because this bike has a carbon frame doesn't mean it's off the hook. Let's weigh this and see how it stacks up to all the other street trials bikes. This bike is 21.5 pounds or 9.7 kilos. Definitely on the light end when it comes to street trials bikes, which makes sense because of the carbon frame and the high level spec. One thing to note is that we're not using pedals on this bike right now, so that would contribute a little bit to the weight, but even at that, this is still one of the lighter street trials bikes that you can get your hands on. You might remember earlier in this video, my big question for this bike was how it was going to stack up to the Inspired 4Play Team, which is the gold standard for street trials. That bike is a couple $100 more than this bike, but it has an aluminum frame where this one has a carbon frame. The spec, as far as I can see, is about the same. You've got these free hub wheels here instead of free wheels, so that's a higher quality style hub and wheel. You've got the same level of brakes. You've got a lot of the same stuff that you see coming through. So really it's going to come down to obviously the frame material and how the bike actually rides. So that's what we're going to find out in our next video when we really take this thing out. But as far as I can tell on spec, they appear to be kind of neck and neck when it comes down to what they actually put on the bike. So that's exciting to see that they're close in price. The quality of all the parts on it is high. You really probably can't go wrong with either one at this stage. What can I say? This bike came out great. Big props to Fabio and the entire team at Canyon for making this bike happen. Looking at all the component choices they made on this bike, you can tell how thoughtful they were about putting it together. And I can only imagine, based off of that, how much effort went into making this frame perfect as well. Now we know that Fabio's done a lot of testing on this bike, including famously hitting the frame with a hammer to test its durability. But thankfully, we won't have to do any of that, right? So in our next video, we're gonna take this bike out into the streets and give it a proper test. But in the meantime, if you're in the market for a bike, here are 2 videos that you might wanna check out that are gonna give you a little bit more information on how to choose the right trials bike. Go check them out, and we'll see you in the next video.